For yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You know, the Bible talks a lot about the rod. Remember back in Exodus when Moses was being called to do a great work for God, and he felt inadequate, like you do and like I do all the time. And I think it's such a great question that God asked him. He said, Moses, what is in your hand? He didn't say what is not in your hand. He didn't say what do you not have. He didn't say where do you fall short. He said, what do you have? And Moses was a shepherd, and he carried a rod, a shepherd's rod. These things were used to climb up hills, and they were used to take care of wolves. When wolves came, they were used to steady yourself after a hard day's work. I need two of them. I think one under each arm sometimes. But God said, what is it that you have? And I think that's so beautiful that God can take whatever it is that you have and he can use that. It doesn't matter what it is. If you'll just take what you have and he said, it is a rod. It's just a rod. It's all I have, God. God said, lay it down before me. Throw it down. Moses throws it down. It turns into a snake. And then he reaches out and grabs it by the tail. It turns back into a rod. But we see the principle there that if we'll take what we do have and be willing to follow the instructions of God with it and lay it down before him, then the supernatural kicks in and it can become something alive. Remember Aaron's rod? The rod that budded? Aaron had a rod. And when he laid it before the Lord with all the other rods from all the other tribal leaders, only his brought forth life. We have that rod that will bud, the one that life's in. If we give whatever we have to God, there's life in it. It will blossom and it will bud. I love the whole idea about the rod. And remember when Moses' rod in Scripture becomes God's rod, people began to refer to it as the rod of God. So whatever it is you have, maybe you got an old junky car that won't hardly make it. Give it to the Lord, and maybe it will become the car of God instead of that old clunker. Maybe God will bless it. Maybe some life will go back into that transmission if you'll begin to use it for him. Carry people to the store and to the doctor's office and do something with that. Maybe you've got a house that's not so blessed right now. Give that house to God. Allow God to use it for what make him the Lord over that house. And watch his life appear right in the middle of it. Solomon, later in Scripture, he says to beat children with the rod, which I'd like to beat him with a rod, just between you and me. Don't beat children with a rod. It could kill them. And then I love, I guess, my favorite story in Scripture about the rod is when Israel was fighting against the Amalekites. You remember the story. Joshua was down in the battle, and he's doing battle. Moses is standing up on the mountain, and as long as Moses held that rod up, then Israel prevailed. And when he began to get tired and the rod began to fall down, Israel would begin to lose. And then when he'd get the strength and he'd put that rod back up, then Israel would prevail again. And he'd get tired and they'd lose and then they'd win. And you remember what happened? Aaron and Hur came alongside Moses. They sat him down on a rock and he held that rod up high, and each one of them took an arm and they supported him holding that rod up. Now, I love the principle of that story that folks can come alongside you and help you. When you're too weak, then God will send somebody that can hold your arms up. But I'll tell you something else I like about that story, and it has to do with the history of a shepherd's rod. When a shepherd had a rod out in the field, and let's say a bear came up, and he used that rod and he would chase off that bear and he would gain a great victory and save the sheep. Well, he might sit by the campfire that night and he might take his knife and carve a bear into that rod. And then maybe later on, let's say a tiger came or a lion and he was able to defeat it. He may have a lion's head. In fact, this could be turned into a lion's head. My boys gave me this stick. This could be carved into something. I'm not sure what. But he would also write words of victory on it. When he got victory in prayer, when he got victory over his enemies at different times, then he would carve it into that stick. So I want you to know that while it was a great principle that others were helping hold up his hands, Moses also held that rod up because as he did, he could look at it and see the time that he defeated the fox. He could see the time that the Philistines came and God caused him to have great victory. He could see the time the bear came, the carving of the bear. And as he began to look at the rod of testimony, is another name for it, as he began to look at that rod of testimony, it caused him to become an overcomer. Because when you remember that God did it for you one time, then it helps you to believe that he could do it for you again. When you begin, remember when David encouraged himself in the Lord? That's what you need to do. Somebody out there tonight, you need to encourage yourself in the Lord. You need to tell yourself, remind yourself of the times that you weren't going to make it and you made it. The times when you didn't have enough and God saw to it that you did have enough. The times when you were butting your head up against a brick wall and realized it wasn't a wall at all, it was a call. And you rose up over that thing and began to walk out a brand new place. I'm here to tell you tonight that it's time to look at the rod of God that's in your hand. What is in your hand? One thing that's there is a testimony. We've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. Thank God for Jesus' blood, the Lamb's blood that was shed once and for all. And thank God for our testimony. Been here before, made it through it, gonna make it through it again. Not gonna fold under pressure, not gonna lay down because I can't pay the bills or because my body doesn't want to work right. Not gonna stop because I'm depressed or discouraged. I'm gonna keep on. And I'm gonna stare at the testimony and I'm gonna remember how I made it through it last time by faith. Whoever you are tonight, I believe this might be for some folks in particular. I want you to take time to rehearse. Look at the rod of testimony and just rehearse what all God's done for you. He'll do it again. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And you are an overcomer. Don't ever forget that.